Make sure this. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second branch impact call of 2020. Now, you might recognize that this is a brand new recording from the live call that we did this past Tuesday. I've been having this battle with Zoom, and turns out we're still not fixing the problem. I do think we have the solution, though, so in the future, we should not be having this issue. You should not be waiting for more than 24 hours for the recording, but at this point in time, we're going to re-record the second branch impact call. With that being said, I will release the panel discussion tomorrow once I have a second conversation with Mila and Paige. In addition to that, in our last call, we had about 30 minutes of Q&A from the attendees. I do have all of those questions that were asked, so I'm going to do my best at the end of this message to go back to the questions that were asked during the original call and answer them for all of the people who are watching the recording. That being said, a couple of quick housekeeping items. First one being is that our next branch impact call is on February 11th. That is a Tuesday. And once again, it is at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be talking about all things culture and relationship building. That is a theme for February. You will have a really awesome treat on February 25th with John Kane talking about relationship building. That man is the absolute guru when it comes to building valuable relationships and building respect and trust amongst his peers. So look forward to those 2 dates, February 11th and February 25th. Both times at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Obviously, both will be recorded, and the goal is to have those recordings be saved properly and be shared with you within 24 hours of the live call. So those are the first two housekeeping items. The third would be that we have a corresponding worksheet that goes along with today's call. So if you are part of the Branch Impact Facebook group, you have access to this worksheet. If you happen to be a new DM or a DVM and you do not have access to this worksheet, just send me a message on Facebook and I will get you the worksheet right away. If you are part of the Branch Impact Facebook group, here's how you find the worksheet. So you'll see here on the screen, I'm showing you what the Branch Impact Group 2020 looks like. All that you have to do is click over here on the left-hand side where it says Files. Click Files, and then you'll see January Week 4. It'll pop up. All you have to do is click it, download it, print it out, and use it. I will walk you through parts of the worksheet today. There are areas for you to take notes on. There are a couple of activities for you to do along the call. And then there's also a lot of journaling and reflection questions. So not only is this worksheet designed to serve the content in today's message, but it's also designed to serve your own introspective work as well. So it's an incredibly valuable worksheet to print out and to work on. So go ahead and get that right now. All right. The objective of today's call is to continue our discussion around developing positive habits. If you haven't noticed, the theme of January has really been about commitment and habits, because when we're in January, that's an incredibly important time to really solidify what your goals are, but equal, if not more important, it's important to solidify what your habits and your commitments are. So like I said, the objective of today's message is, one, to continue our discussion around developing positive habits, to bring awareness to the common causes of negative decision making, and provide insight on how to avoid and overcome these causes. And then the third objective is to introduce you to an easy exercise that will help you create a concrete growth plan for the springtime. Now, like I said, we're going to continue our discussion. So I think it's important that we do a quick overview of what we covered in our first call. Now, if you were on the first call, or if you've watched the first call recording, this looks familiar to you. This was the tree of commitment that I drew out for you. Yes, I put my Picasso hat on for that call. If you haven't seen this yet, it means you haven't watched the first call. So my first piece of advice for you all would be to go back and watch that first call, because it was really powerful and the feedback has been incredible. So quick, brief 30-second overview. On the first call, we talked about how the seed that you plant is your decision, it's your why, it's your purpose, it's why you are deciding to become a branch manager. So that's the first step, right? And all of you here watching this have made that decision to one extent or another. Now, here's the really important thing is that when you have a seed planted, what do you have to do? Well, you have to water that seed. And that water really comes down to solidifying your decision, making that commitment, and then taking action. And as you water that seed, you will then begin to grow these roots down here that I showed. These roots are your habits. So the definition of habit that I gave in the first call was a conscious decision to repeat actions until those actions themselves become subconscious. So a conscious decision to repeat actions. You're making a commitment to your actions, which is that water here, until the actions themselves become subconscious, which is what these habits are, right? So the more you water your seed, the stronger your habits will grow. The stronger your habits grow, the quicker your seed, or the quicker your tree begins to sprout, right? So all of this work right here, this is all done now. This is all campaign 1 work. And you'll see here, this ground level, that signifies campaign 2. So all of this work you're doing now, all of this unseen, unrecognized work is designed to create that first little sprout. Once that first sprout is created, then you'll begin to see the tree grow. So this tree is growing, and again, you're continuing to water your seed, grow your habits, solidify your roots, because as your tree begins to grow nice and strong, there will be outside external forces that come out of your control and hit you. And that is what we see as adversity. The stronger your roots are, the stronger your tree is, the better you can handle adversity. And there will be adversity throughout your summer. So that's why it's so valuable and important. That's why we spent 2 full calls talking about habits and commitments, because this really is what sets you up for success as you begin to grow your office this summer, aka the tree in this analogy. You'll go throughout the summer, you'll begin to grow branches. These branches look like your first 10K week. They look like your first 20K or 20-person training class. They look like your first 10K fast starter. All of these things begin to become reality, and that's these branches here. Your leaves will begin to grow, and that's more of the, the 15K weeks, the 20K weeks. And then you have your fruit that begins to grow. The fruit is like your 30K weeks, or your first 10K commission week, or your first 10K personal sales week during the SC2 push. All of these really amazing things that you're shooting for, that's what this fruit is, right? But that comes at the very end. So the whole point of this message that we gave during that first call is that the work that needs to be done now is unseen and unrecognized. That does not mean it's unimportant, right? That's actually the complete opposite. It is so important because it sets you up to grow this plant here, which eventually sprouts into this tree. So at the end of campaign 2, you and I can have a discussion, and I'm going to tell you to go grab your ladder, climb up your tree, grab a fruit, sit down, and eat the fruits of your labor. And the fruits of your labor look like a trip to Spain, look like a fat bank account, look like a whole new improved you, all of these great things. So that right here was the gist of what we covered, but I highly suggest that if you did not watch that video already, you go back and watch it. It is on YouTube. Just search Shelby Wildgus. Click on my channel. You will find the playlist called Branch Impact Calls 2020. And that entire message is on there for you to see. Now, like I said, you have a corresponding worksheet that goes along with this call. So I'm going to share my screen once again here, and I'll show you how we're going to work through this worksheet. So this is what the front of this worksheet looks like. And much of what we're going to be talking about today is the difference between an input and an output here. All right, so I'm going to share some insight with all of you about what I see being common mistakes that branches make now, in hopes that it brings the awareness to you to kind of avoid those mistakes. You've heard me say this before if you've watched the first call, or if you've had any type of conversation, or if you see me speak on stage. I love the phrase, awareness is the catalyst to change. So bringing awareness to you to some of the common mistakes I see branches make now, I think is really important. So here's the first common mistake that I see, and this is the first topic that we're going to discuss about developing positive habits, is that the branches, they understand their goal, right? They understand that a goal is an output, but they fail to recognize what the input is. So most branches, what I see is they're only focusing on this. They're only focusing on, oh, let's make sure this is properly adjusted here. There we go. They're only focusing on their goal or their output. And so I'll have these conversations with these branches who are wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, energetic, all of the right components of your attitude right now. You should be enthusiastic, you should be energetic, you should be excited, you should be confident, all of these great things. And I'll ask them, hey, what are you thinking about for the summer? What's your goal? And they'll tell me 500K, I'm going after the silver cup, it's going to be great. And I'm like, cool, that's totally possible. How are you going to do it? And that's kind of where the conversation stops. And I fell victim to this so hard my first branch summer. I remember my manager talking to me and saying, Shelby, what's your goal? And I said to him, well, I'm definitely going to do 150. I probably could do or should do 300, and I could do 500. He goes, okay, not telling you that you can't, but how are you going to do that? And I just come off of a summer where I'd sold $67,000 personally. So my response to my DVM was, oh, well, I'm going to find 3 of me. And that'll at least satisfy the 150. And for those of you that have been former branches, you know that that is not likely. It is not likely to find 3 people who are going to sell $67,000 for you during a summer. And so what I failed to recognize was the importance of the inputs, was the importance of the habits I had to create and the systems that I had to follow and learn, because I was so focused on the output and what I thought was possible that I failed to recognize the work that needed to go in to making this possible. So with that being said, let's talk about developing positive habits. It starts with the awareness that the habits are your inputs. The habits create the output. And you have to start here. So if you're following along in this worksheet, right, what I want you to do right now is I want you to think about your goal. It's important to continue to think about your goal. And I do think that, you know, we have a lot of altruistic goals here in Vector to change people's lives, to give people the experience that you were given. Those are really valuable, but from a purely planning and strategizing standpoint, it is important to have a number-oriented goal. So let's say your goal is a 100K branch. Well, having this number is a really good start because it allows you to think about what are the inputs to create this output. And one of the biggest inputs is recruits, right? And if you think about what a PPR is productivity per recruit. The average PPR in Vector right now, I think, is roughly around 1,800. But you know what? Let's play it safe and let's use 1,500 as a number. So we take $100,000 in CPO, that's our goal, and we divide it by 1,500. That means that you have to have an input of 67 reps to create the output of $100,000 of CPO. Now that's a very basic example. There's a lot more to it, but then you look at that 67 as an output. What is the system that creates that 67? Well, you go a little bit deeper, and that is a PR system, or that is a social media jumpstart system, or that is a campus system. And all of these things are actually habits, right? So you can see how there's a long rabbit hole that we could go down talking about the inputs and the outputs, but what is really important to recognize is that inputs always come first. It's great to talk about your goal, but action is what speaks loudest, right? Action is what speaks loudest. So I want you to think right now regarding what your goal is, whether it's 100K, 50K, 200K, 500K, I don't really care. What's most important is that you are thinking strategically, and you're saying, or you're asking yourself, what are the habits and the systems that I need to create in order to make this possible? what's amazing about doing that is it informs your training in the springtime. So let's say, for example, you are thinking through this question of what habits and systems do I need to create, and you recognize that one of your habits that you have to create is getting into the habit of friending people. Well, then when you are doing your weekly scheduling, like let's say on a Sunday night, you know that if that habit is what you're trying to create, then you need to put 30 minutes a day of friending people, right? And so that will inform part of your training this spring. Now, when we talk about habits, it's not just the technical habits that are encouraged to work on in the spring. It's also those tactical habits. It's those mindset shifts. So thinking again about what are some of the inputs that are required to create this output? Well, I would say a really positive habit would be to be a positive thinker. So like another habit would be to take on the positive perspective. And how do you train yourself to do that? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I would say the first thing is to always be curious instead of critical, and to start looking for the silver lining in situations that aren't always that great. And what you'll notice on the back of every single one of these worksheets is I always have you do a gratitude and attitude check. And this is designed to help you strengthen that habit of creating that positive perspective. Now, one of the beautiful things about, I've already probably used that phrase, one of the beautiful things, but there's so many beautiful things about understanding this concept here. But one of my favorite parts about understanding this concept is that when you're focusing on the inputs, you don't have to focus so much on the outputs. So it's all about trusting the process, right? I'm a Philly girl. That's our motto for the 76ers, but it's a motto for a lot of people just in general, right? Trust the process. So rather than getting obsessive or overwhelmed about the goal, you can look at the inputs and the habits and the systems. And if you focus on the inputs, the output will create itself. If you focus on the inputs, the output will create itself. I think there's so much freedom in this reminder because it allows you to take on the challenge of running a branch one day at a time. So what I mean by this is that I oftentimes see branches who have these amazing goals, and we talk about the goals and they're like, yeah, I want to do a 200K branch. I'm like, that's amazing. That's great. Tell me how. And they don't always have the right answer, but they end up figuring it out, right? They go throughout their training, they go to their CAP session, they work with their DM and their DVM through TLA and through weekly meetings, and they end up creating a plan for themselves. So day one of branch begins, and they're following the plan, and they're still focusing really heavily on this goal of 200,000. And by their fourth week in the business, they are nowhere near that $200,000 mark. And so they're so focused on this output that they begin to slack on the inputs because they begin to say, well, you know what? I'm not going to hit 200,000. So why even try? Or maybe it's not that extreme, but that voice begins to speak. And I call that a noise because it's not empowering, right? So this noise begins in their head of, well, why should I even try, right? And with that, that's where a lot of disconnect happens. And that's where a lot of people begin to take a dip. When instead, if you have one bad day, okay, fine. Wake up the next day and continue to work on the system and trust that through working on the system, the goal will end up happening. I've seen so many examples of branch managers who've had really crappy starts, but they focus on the system. They continue to do the habits and the systems that they've worked so hard to create and to learn, and they have those big pop weeks. They have those 20K, 30K weeks. And sometimes it only takes one rep to get the ball rolling, but they focus here and they release control of here. This is in your control. Now, I'm not going to say that this output is out of your control, because by nature of focusing on the inputs, the output is in your control if you focus on what is really in your control, which is your actions, right? So that is the first part of developing positive habits, is knowing where to focus, and that's on the inputs. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and this was during the recap of the first call, but the definition that I use when talking about habits is consciously committing to a repetitive action until the action itself becomes subconscious. So I'm reading this book right now called Atomic Habits, and there have been a few giveaways for this book because I think it's such a valuable book to read. So for those of you that love reading, either get the audiobook or get the actual book. It's phenomenal, and I would suggest looking up and getting to know the author, James Clear, because he's amazing. So in this book, he talks about the different types of habits. And there are 2 habits I'm going to mention now, and then there's going to be a third that I'm going to mention a little bit afterwards. So the 2 habits that I brought up during our training last week or last time was the gateway habit and the keystone habit. So a gateway habit is a small habit that gets the ball rolling on a larger habit that you're trying to create. So the best example that I can give to all of you with a gateway habit is, let's say a habit that you're trying to create is going to the gym every day after work. A gateway habit to creating that larger habit would be to get in the habit of getting into your gym clothes as soon as you get home from work. And the reason why this would be considered a gateway habit is because once you're in those gym clothes, the chances of you going to the gym have greatly increased. So you've now kind of created that gateway to accomplishing that larger habit that you're working on creating. So that's the first habit group that we talked about last week or last call. Then there's the keystone habit. Now the keystone habit is different than the gateway habit. And what the keystone habit is, it would be the habit that kind of, if you were to complete this habit and create this habit, everything else in your life would begin to fall into place. So if we're on the same example of healthy eating, a keystone habit for some people might be meal prepping. If they get into the habit of meal prepping, well, then everything else begins to fall into place for them, right? They save more money, they make better decisions, they don't go out to eat as much, they know what they're eating, they know what they're cooking, all of that kind of stuff happens because they've developed that keystone habit. So these really allow you to keep things simple. The gateway habit allows you just to get the ball rolling, and the keystone habit allows you to work smarter, not necessarily harder, because this idea of a keystone habit allows you to focus on 1 or 2 major habits, trusting that everything else will fall into place if these 1 or 2 habits are created. Now, the third habit that I want to talk about, we're going to talk about a little bit more at length, is this idea of the atomic habit, and it comes from the book Atomic Habits. The atomic habit is really, really valuable here. So we're gonna bring the screen back to me. So the atomic habit is a small habit. It's different than the gateway habit, but it is a very small habit. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to train yourself to ease into the habit, and it's a far more effective way to change. So I'm going to give you a quick example that I've heard from Tony Robbins. Now, all of you know who Tony Robbins is. If you don't, go get to know who he is, because he's amazing. And I attended one of his UPWs back in 2017. And he told this story about how he was learning how to golf. And I mean, he's a big dude, athletic, and, you know, he's got all the Jedi mind tricks. So you would expect, you know, golf is a pretty mindful game. Tony should be kind of a natural at it. So he's here golfing, and every swing he takes, the ball is going far right. And he's, you know, trying to do everything right, trying to mirror the pros that he's watching. And for some reason, he can't get the ball to go straight. And so he pulls over the pro that he's with, and he says, you know, hey, can you help me shift? Like, what do I need to do? Like, what am I doing wrong? And the pro says, you just need to angle your body about 2 millimeters to the right. And that was it, just 2 millimeters. And Tony moves his body. It's like such a subtle shift. He could barely even recognize it, but it was just 2 millimeters. And he swings and he hits, and the ball goes straight. So this idea of atomic habits is that it's that 2 millimeter shift that makes a really big change. It also allows you to, again, move into these larger habits over time that you're aiming for, and do it in a sustainable way. So here's another example that I oftentimes hear from branch managers is they get all hyped up over training hard and creating these really big habits. And, a common habit that I see amongst the branch class, and it's one that I'm working on myself, is waking up early. Because we hear the power of waking up early, right? We hear the 5 a.m. clubs. We know the miracle morning. We understand that, the early bird gets the worm, right? And so I'll talk to people, and the habit that they share with me is that they want to start waking up early. I go, okay, great. Well, what time are you going to wake up? And they say 4:30 a.m. I go, okay, that's early. Why? And they give me all the reasons why. And then I say, okay, what time do you currently wake up? And they say 9 a.m. And I say, okay, so what's your plan? And they go, well, I'm just going to start waking up at 4:30 a.m. And that's like somebody who's addicted to smoking cigarettes telling you they're going to quit cold turkey tomorrow. The likelihood of that actually happening and staying consistent is extremely low. And so with this idea of the atomic habits, instead of going from 9 a.m. to 4:30 a.m., maybe for your first week, you go from 9 a.m. to 8:30. And then from your second week, you go from 8:30 to 8:15. And then 8:15 to 7:45. And you work your way up to 4:30 a.m. because that actually creates sustainability and it allows you to move your way into this period where you are now waking up at 4:30 a.m. And the beautiful thing about atomic habits is that you have the time right now to ease yourself into these habits that you want to create for the summer. There's about 3.5 months left until the summer begins. For some of you, 4 months. So you have the time to ease yourself into these bigger, stronger, maybe keystone habits or these goal habits that you have. You have the time to ease into it. It's just a matter of recognizing that easing into it creates more sustainability. A quote from the Atomic Habits book that I thought was really valuable for all of you to hear is, a regular practice or routine that is not only small and easy to do, but a source of incredible power is the definition that James Clear gives of atomic habits. So it's a regular practice or routine that is not only small and easy to do, but a source of incredible power. It is a component of the system of compound growth. So I want to show you what compound growth actually looks like. Now, there's an awesome book. So we're on a lot of book trends right now, right, of book recommendations. There's an awesome book called The Compound Effect that goes into a lot more depth about what this is, but I'm going to do my best to explain to you exactly what the compound effect is through a little bit of a drawing here. So let's go over to my screen. Okay, so what is the compound effect and how does it apply to atomic habits? Well, again, let's say that we're all starting right here. This is our starting point. This is January 30th. And here's our ending point, right? We want to get to a point in campaign 2 where we're really operating at a peak efficiency, peak performance, like we're feeling really good. Now, where you currently are is not where you need to stay, right? If you have these big goals, it requires a different version of yourself. It requires a better version of yourself. So that's why it's so important right now to be developing these habits and making these commitments and doing the training so that way you are not stagnant. However, some people will be, and that's fine, to each their own. But if you're stagnant, if you stay the same, well, then you should expect the same results. Ultimately, what you want is a higher version of yourself, right? You want to operate at a better efficiency, at a better performance level. You don't want to go down here, right? You don't want to be operating at a lesser performance level. So let's show you the compound effect at work. And here's why creating atomic habits are so valuable. So let's go back with this, let's go with eating healthy, because I think eating healthy is a keystone habit for many people in Vector because it creates more energy, it creates more focus, it allows you to feel more confident and allows you to feel better about yourself. So healthy eating, healthy living, that kind of thing. So let's say instead of doing a 30-day crash cleanse diet, you decide that you're just going to start by drinking more water. So January 30th, you make this commitment to drinking more water. And by February 7th, you're up to, a half a gallon a day. And you're feeling pretty good, right? You're not shifting that much. You're not really noticing that big of a change, but that's okay. Like, you're still feeling pretty good. So because you're feeling pretty good, you decide to add on a second atomic habit where it's, I'm going to start taking the stairs instead of the elevator. So now you've gone through 2 weeks of drinking more water, taking the stairs instead of the elevator. You're starting to recognize you're having a lot more energy. So you begin to add on a third habit where it's, instead of eating a cookie as dessert, you have, let's say, Arctic freeze, no calorie ice cream, or you just skip dessert altogether and you start doing that. And you're starting now to see some results. And you keep this process up where you're making these small, what seems to be insignificant changes over a long period of time. And what happens is, sure, was it an overnight thing? Absolutely not. But by campaign 2, you are up here. That's drastically different than where you currently stand. Now, the same thing goes for these negative habits. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to avoid the negative habit decision making. But let's say one of the negative habits that you are currently doing is you are procrastinating on your training. And so right now, January 30th, you've got all of this time and it's okay. And so you put one thing off and that's fine, right? There's really no big difference between here and here. So then you keep going and you put one thing off and then put another thing off, and you know how procrastination works. So as you're going down, like, you do begin to have this spiral where, without recognizing it, because you're procrastinating in one area of your life, maybe it's with scripting training, you begin to procrastinate in other areas of your life because you become overwhelmed with all the things that you have to do because you've left them for all last minute, right? And so while, on February 7th, the difference between the person who's making these positive habits, the person who's not making any habits, and the person who's feeding the negative habits is really not that much. By campaign 2, it's pretty significant, right? This is the 200K branch. This is the, 50K branch. And then this is the 10K branch, right? So we see that come full circle in the results. So it's up to you now to make those small, seemingly insignificant changes to create that individual that you're really looking to be. Now, speaking of individual, we're going to talk a little bit about the 3 layers of change. So we're still, by the way, talking about developing positive habits. So to reiterate where we're at right now, we talked about the importance of focusing on your input as opposed to your output. We talked about the importance of those 3 different types of goals: gateway, keystone, and atomic habits. Now we're going to talk about how to really, really commit to creating habits. Now, this is a little bit deeper, so I understand that there's questions, and if you do have questions, just send me a message on Facebook and I'll make sure to clarify, since I know this isn't a live call right now. But these 3 layers of change also come from the book Atomic Habits, and there are again 3. So the first one is outcome. So we'll go back to my notes here so I can show you this. Let me share my screen. Okay. So the first layer of change is outcome, right? It's that output. So most people operate from this level here. They want to make some kind of physical or outer change about their life. Maybe they want to lose 35 pounds. Or they want to begin waking up at 4:30 in the morning, or they want to find a significant other. So they identify with that change that they want to have, and that's usually where they stop. They know they want to make a change, but that's about it. The second layer is the process layer. So if you move past the outcome layer, you know you want to make this change of this outcome, and you identify that, well, if you want to make a change, you have to change what you're currently doing. Well, that's that next step, right? That's important. So if you know that you want to lose 25 pounds or lose 35 pounds, then you have to look at what you're currently doing, what you're currently eating, and begin to make those changes. Same thing goes for, dating pool. If you want to find a significant other, you have to look at where you're currently looking and say, is this where I'm going to find my partner? There's a lot of other examples that we can go down, but this is the second layer. This is where I would say, 60 to 70% of people can get to this layer. Now, here's the key. This is the third layer, and this is the one where most people don't get to. But again, awareness is a catalyst to change. So I'm going to show you this layer, and it's up to you to get there. So this final layer, this deepest layer is self. What does that mean? So self means that you have to look at yourself and what you currently believe to be true about yourself and ask, is that congruent with the habits and the outcomes that I am trying to create? Process has a lot to do with habits, right? And systems. So you have to look at your beliefs and ask if they align with these two areas that you're trying to change. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that you are trying to wake up at 4:30 in the morning. You're trying to create that change for yourself because you want to give yourself more time to get things done, more uninterrupted time, wake up before all the other people. So that's your outcome. So you create the habit, right? So you begin to set your alarm clock for 8:30 and then 8:15, and then 7:45 and then 7:30, right? You do the atomic habit thing. But if you continue to say, I'm not a morning person, I'm not a morning person, I'm not a morning person, well, then these things no longer work. They only work for a short period of time. But if what you believe about yourself is, I am not a morning person, well, you will self-sabotage. The same thing goes for the dating pool, right? If you're trying to find yourself a significant other, you're going through the process of swiping left, swiping right, all of that good stuff. You're going out, you're putting yourself out there, but you don't believe you're worthy of finding love. We can get deep in that one, right? If you don't believe you're worthy of finding love, well, then you will self-sabotage the process. So what you have to ask yourself is, what beliefs are holding me back and could propel me forward? So let's talk about this could propel me forward. Oops, I can't see that. My bad. Second. Could propel me forward, right? So let's talk about that for a second here. It's important to recognize that the output you're seeking, let's go back down here, the output you're seeking, you have to ask yourself, who is that person? Who is the 100K branch? Who is the 200K branch? Which is why it's so valuable that we are bringing these former top tier branch managers on to speak to you about what their habits were, what their actions were, all of that good stuff, because it allows you to get into the brain of who they are and to hopefully emulate some of the actions and the habits that they created for themselves, because they are the example, right? So you have to ask yourself, what beliefs could propel me forward? And that's why we talk a lot about the power of affirmations, right? The I am statements. And that will help you create new beliefs about yourself. And so rather than saying, well, yeah, I'm going to be a branch manager, say, I am a branch manager, and begin to act as if. So if you want to be a 200K branch, you've got to ask yourself, well, what habits would a 200K branch manager have? How would they have difficult conversations with people? How would they run team meetings? How would they promote people? How would they delegate tasks? Ask these questions. And these are great questions to ask former 200K branch managers, former 100K branch managers. If you're trying to emulate and create the beliefs about yourself, or to begin to say, I am X, Y, and Z, well, go find out what these other people who've already done it, who they are, and what they've done to get them to that point. So to reiterate, look at your outcome, your intended outcome, and ask yourself, who is that person? Okay, cool. One more thing that I want to talk about in this developing positive habits section of the call is to remind everybody of a really, really great quote that I mentioned in the first call. And this quote is by David Goggins of the book Can't Hurt Me. And he says, you do not rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training. I think that quote is hugely valuable. And what was so fascinating about this quote was that it also showed up in Atomic Habits, but slightly different. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits and systems. So again, it just reiterates the importance of looking at the input first and output second. All right, let's move on to the common causes of negative decision making. Now, I know that we like to focus on the positive here at Vector, and I'm all about that. However, I think, again, awareness is the catalyst to change. So if you bring awareness to what is common human condition, well, then you can identify when you're going down this spiral that will ultimately cause you to make poor decisions come summertime. So the first one, which I think is the most common one that I've certainly dealt with, I still deal with to this day, and I know many of you do as well, is procrastination. And if we were having a live call right now, or if we were in a conference room, I would ask everybody to raise their hand if they identified as a procrastinator. And I would say about 60% of the room would probably raise their hand, and the other 40% of the room would be lying, right? We all procrastinate. And the reason why, and this is similar to what I mentioned in the first call that we had, is because we as humans care too much about our present self and not enough about our future self. Now you might recognize that. So again, the quote is, we as humans care too much about our present self and not enough about our future self. You might recognize a correlation between why we don't stick with positive habits. It's because we care too much about the short-term gain of eating a chocolate bar than we do of the long-term gain of drinking a kale smoothie. And we try to avoid the short-term pain of going to the gym, and we don't really think about the long-term pain that is associated with not going to the gym, right? So with procrastination, we as humans care too much about our present self and not enough about our future self. So that is why procrastination is such a popular, poor, negative habit to have. And what it leads to is cutting corners and justifying excuses. So how to become a recovering procrastinator, right? So here's a good idea of this belief system that we have about ourselves. I know for a period of time, I was like, yeah, I'm totally a procrastinator. And I said that about myself. And the more I said it, the more it just became part of my identity. So now what I say is I'm a recovering procrastinator. One, because it gets people to laugh, and two, because it allows me to remember that I am overcoming procrastination. So here are 3 ways to become a recovering procrastinator. Number 1, make rewards of long-term behavior more immediate. Again, that's make rewards of long-term behavior more immediate. What does that mean? Well, that means that there's a lot of power behind visualizing the benefits your future self will enjoy. So if you can allow yourself to think what it will feel like by the end of campaign 2, when you are, again, sitting under that figurative tree, eating the fruits of your labor, it will allow you to find more energy and fuel to making the positive decisions now and not procrastinating on them, because you can see more clearly what is possible. So again, number 1, make rewards of long-term behavior more immediate. Number 2, make costs of procrastination more immediate. So one of the best ways to do this is to have an accountability buddy. So for example, if one of the habits that you're trying to create is getting to the gym every morning, well, if you're not meeting anybody there, that snooze alarm feels pretty nice, right? You're not letting anybody down except for yourself, and oftentimes it's a lot easier to let ourselves down than it is let other people down. So if you have an accountability partner who's going to be there waiting for you at 7 a.m., well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of a difficult decision to hit the snooze alarm when you know that your buddy over there is going to be calling you or texting you saying, hey, where are you? That you're going to, do the squats with me or whatever. So that's one way to do it. Another thing that I know my gym does that some of your gyms might do is they have a cancellation or a no-show fee for classes. So for me, I love taking classes. I love going to yoga class and I love going to spin class, or I'm starting to love going to spin class, I should say. So if I sign up for a class and I cancel within 24 hours or within 12 hours, I think I get charged $5. That $5 can add up quickly. So what I do is I sign up for these classes knowing that I'm going to go, and I want to try to avoid that charge, that meaningless charge. So I go to the class. That's a great way to make cost of procrastination more immediate. Number 3, and the final way to become a recovering procrastinator, is to remove procrastination triggers from your environment. So if one of the habits that you're trying to create is eating healthy, well, don't allow Oreos to sit in your cupboard, because that's a great way to say, you know what, I'm going to have this whole sleeve of Oreos and I'll just start tomorrow. The start tomorrow thing, that is one of the biggest killers to creating positive habits. So that was all about procrastination. That's probably the biggest negative decision-making habit that people have. Okay, moving on to the next area here. It is impatience. This one is one that I'm incredibly passionate about, because I know for myself, I've dealt with impatience in so many different layers and levels of my life. So especially with our generation, impatience runs rampant, because the way that we've grown up is we've grown up with everything at the touch of our fingers. And even more so with first-time branch managers coming off of the field, this is something that you really have to work to overcome, because you're used to going into Mrs. Jones' house, doing the demo, and walking out with either an order or no sale, right? So you get to see action result nearly immediately. As a manager, you do not see that. So much of your action is now, right? We talked about what's under the ground, what grows the roots. So much of your action is now. And then even once the summer begins, you're still putting in a lot of action, and you have to trust that the results will come. And sometimes that's really difficult for people. So something that helps me with this process is to remember to channel my impatience away from the results and into the actions. So here's a good quote to remember: be impatient with your actions and patient with your results. If you're focused on the results all the time, you will be on an emotional roller coaster, because your mood every day is going to be tied to your results, which won't always be great. At some point, they'll be great, but they're not always going to be great. So it's important to focus on what can I do today to take action to satisfy the inputs and trust that the outputs will come. Okay, the third and final major cause of negative decision making is this lack of willpower. So I think a lot of people, when they hear the term willpower, they identify it as not having a strong ability to overcome challenges or to avoid procrastination, to say no to things, all of that. But there's actually a second component of willpower that not a lot of people take into consideration. So there's a strong correlation between willpower and decision fatigue. So what does decision fatigue mean? It means that over a course of a day, we as human beings are making so many decisions that, just like a muscle, just like if you're running a marathon, the way you start the marathon, the way you end the marathon, it's a little bit different in terms of energy-wise, right? Sure, maybe when you're sprinting to the finish line, it's a different energy, but when you're at mile 17, you're pretty low on energy. So it's the same thing with decision-making. Think about your day. Usually 3 to 5 p.m., like I know for me, I'm pretty much useless at that time. Like I have made so many decisions already throughout the day that, like, if you ask me a question between 3 and 5 p.m., like you're not always going to get the best answer. So with that being said, how do we overcome decision fatigue, which allows us to naturally make better decisions, right? And have more willpower? Well, there's 5 steps to that. Number 1, plan, plan, plan. Plan the week before, plan the night before. And what I mean by that is make sure that you've got everything in your schedule so you know at what time you're supposed to be doing this thing. I see so many branches get into this overwhelmed state when they don't have a significant plan that they're following, because it'll be 2 p.m. in the afternoon. They've wrapped up one interview. They have another interview in like 4 hours, and they're like, well, what do I do now? And they don't always make the best decisions in those moments because they're not sure what to do, and it's already 2 p.m. in the afternoon and they've already made all of these decisions. So if you plan out your schedule and you literally have every single minute planned, and listen, I think you should put in like 3 times a day for 15 minutes a day. Like, you go outside and decompress. I think that's really important, but make sure you have that in your schedule, right? Have when you're doing PR calling in your schedule, have when you're doing PDI in your schedule, have when you're doing training check-in calls in your schedule, have all of those things in your schedule. In addition, have in your schedule when you're meal prepping, when you're going to the gym, when you're waking up, when you're going to sleep. When you plan, you find more freedom. Number 2, do the most important thing first. So there's a great book that talks about this, and I haven't read it, but I know the synopsis of it, and it's called Eat the Frog. And it's the idea that you're going to naturally procrastinate on things that are pretty significant. And so rather than allowing you to naturally procrastinate, take action right away. Also, the reason why this is so important is because studies show that in the morning hours, you are operating at your most efficient state. You've got the most energy, focus, and attention. So put that towards what's going to move your business forward the most, right? Number 3, this is kind of similar to number 1, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's really important. Honor your commitments, right? So when you have the schedule, it's actually following the schedule. So if it's 2 p.m. and you see that you need to go take a walk for 15 minutes, go take that walk. If you have a PC, bring that person with you and do a walking PC. If it's 3 p.m. and you got to do PC call or a PR calls and you're like, I really feel like going out for lunch. No, you got to do what you say you're going to do. But that brings up a really important point, which is actually number 4, healthy eating. Food is energy. It's fuel. It gives you what you need to sustain yourself throughout the day. So make sure that when you are making your schedule that you include times to eat. This is really important. It's something that I see a lot of people make mistakes with, is that they're not actually scheduling the time to eat, so they forget to eat. Or they are so hungry, but they haven't planned properly, so they go out and they run to McDonald's, pick up a whatever that thing is called, the Big Mac, and they gobble it down. And sure, it might taste good right now, but in an hour, they're like depleted of energy because their body's trying to break down all the crap that's in this Big Mac. So it's important that you're planning to eat healthy. And if you know that your energy is a little bit depleted, but you got a really big interview coming up in the afternoon, well, drink some water and have a good healthy snack, because that's going to allow you to regain some energy and some focus. Okay, final tip, number 5, is simplify. So what I mean by that, there's two parts of this. Number 1 is simplify your decisions by making them the night before if you can. So there's a reason why Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every single day, because it was simple for him. He didn't have to spend 15 minutes looking at his closet, matching his tie to his shirt, and figuring out what's going to look the best this day. This applies especially to women, because I think we as women tend to try to, mix and match our outfits. And I know for me, like when I'm going out with my girlfriends and if we're all getting together at someone's house, like there are at least 3 of my girlfriends that will change into 4 different outfits, right? And if that's happening in the morning time, that could legitimately be 60 minutes wasted. So pick out your outfit the night before, and it also do with meal prepping. Meal prep the night before or the week before if that's easier for you. But doing that eliminates one major decision of what am I going to eat today. If you do that and have it prepared for yourself, then you limit the amount of decisions that you're making in the morning so that you can focus more on the important decisions once you're in your office. And then the final point on the simplify is know what tasks to delegate. what's beautiful about building a team is that you have helping hands. And it's important that you delegate. And we'll do a lot more in depth about how to delegate and what to delegate. But just remember that delegation is elevation. You're helping your team become more bought in when you are delegating to them. All right, so those are the 3 common causes of negative decision making. Number 1, procrastination. Number 2, impatience. Number 3, the decision fatigue. I hope that those really helped. We're going to move on to the final area here that we're going to focus on, which is the awareness wheel exercise. So what this looks like, it's on your worksheet here. I'm going to share my screen. The awareness wheel, which I've already kind of filled out from the first call, this is a really, really great activity to do alongside of your DM or your DVM. And the reason why this works well within this whole topic of habits and decisions is because it allows you to create a plan for yourself. Again, I mean, it's all about the input, right? It's all about understanding what systems are there for you to learn so you can really understand the inputs that ultimately create that desired output. So you'll see here on this wheel, it has 8 different sections of the business. Now, I'll be honest, not all 8 are equal. Like admin work, for example, is by far not, I mean, it's the least important thing with the exception of base pay and fast start prizes, but it's important to understand how to do those things, especially because they will be red flags for a lot of people if they're not getting paid on time or they're not getting the prizes that they were promised. But anyways, the way that you go through this activity is you're going to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. So 10 will be this filled up here, 1 will be down here. It's okay wherever you are right now. What's really important to remember, and this was a quote that I forgot to mention, but it's really applicable right here. Be far more concerned with your current trajectory than your current results, right? So it's okay if you're not where you want to be right now. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't be where you want to be right now. Instead, you should be inspirationally dissatisfied. That was a quote that John Kane said to me recently. Be inspirationally dissatisfied. So know that there's so much more for you to do and be inspired to do it. So this here will help you better understand where you fall in terms of competency in all of these areas. So it's okay if you are a 3 or a 4. I wouldn't think anybody, not even DVMs, are a 10 in any of these areas. So I want you to go through and fill this out. And you'll see here, like just to give some examples. So most of this stuff is very technical stuff. You talk about technical, tactical, and mindset. This is very technical, right? So you've got rep management. You know, how good are you at that first promo, first weekend? Have you had experiences with PCs? Have you had experiences with getting people through their fast start successfully? You know, the interview, that's pretty self-explanatory. Training, pretty self-explanatory. PRs, do you know the systems that are involved with getting PRs in the door? Campus recruiting, do you know your high schools? Do you know how to go to a high school? Do you know how to run a campus table? Admin work, again, the 2 most important areas right here would be base pay and fast start prizes. Social media recruiting, do you know the systems? Do you know how to gain the resources? Do you know how to learn about social media jumpstart? All that kind of stuff. And then promotions. This is one that can sometimes be confusing for people. So it's, you know, the idea of getting people to events, to team meetings, promoting people to key staff, leveraging these different outside, I guess, company-wide resources that we have for people, promoting the trip, the All-American Scholarship, again, the division meetings, the regional meetings, all of that kind of stuff. So I want you to fill this out and then bring it to your DM and say, hey, here's where I'm currently standing. I want to make a plan with you throughout the spring to improve on some of these areas. You by no means have to be great at any of this. I would say just be good at it, because what you'll find is that as you go through your first branch summer, you will learn so much more. You don't need to have everything memorized right now, because I promise you by the end of campaign 2, you will have everything memorized because you'll be doing it so much. But it is important to bring some awareness to this so that way you can make a plan with your DM or DVM to make a significant change. So here's a question you want to ask yourself, but also ask your DM and DVM. What are the systems required to execute each of these areas? So systems would be like the PR system, right? The social media jumpstart system. What habits could I work on creating now that would create more ease and execution? So things like the interview, you know, getting into the habit of running really good pre-screenings. That would make your entire interview process a lot more simple. So that right here is a really important activity to do, and I highly recommend that you do it with your DM or your DVM. So that was the content of the call. Now, I realized that I went a little bit longer than the call did, but I wanted to really go through everything with you all and make sure that I was doing my best ability to explain all this good stuff. Now, there were a few questions that came through during the live call that I want to reference and give answers to. So Savannah Hewitt asked, how often should we do this exercise referencing the awareness wheel in the summer? And my answer to her was, I actually don't think I would do it in the summer, because the summer is really about focusing on your strengths and just focusing on what you know. If you're always focused on like looking at where you can improve, that's a good habit to be in, but I don't want you to drop the ball in terms of taking action because you're afraid that you're not working on the system in the right way. I'm not sure that makes sense. I would just say, focus on what you can, what your strengths are once the summer comes, but the spring is a good time to focus on where you can definitely improve. Daxton Camaro said, Shelby, what are some atomic habits you took on, and then some keystone habits? So a lot of people actually asked me about like atomic habits and keystone habits, and there's some examples of these things. Christina Fernandez asked me, can you give me an example, maybe use workout related reference of the difference between atomic, gateway, and keystone habits? So I'm going to answer both of these questions with my response right here. Fortunately for me, I am going through like a workout regimen habit creation process right now. So from a gateway habit perspective, one of my gateway habits is there's two. If I'm doing a morning workout class, it is to sign up for the class ahead of time. That way I have that short-term pain of potentially losing that $5 if I don't go. But there's also that, short-term gain by going, right? And then the second thing would be if I'm trying to work out in the afternoon, as soon as I get home, I put my workout clothes on. So that's an example of a gateway habit. A keystone habit with this example would be eating healthier, right? Because if I'm eating healthier, I have more fuel to go to the gym. Another keystone habit would be getting good sleep, because the better sleep I get, the more energized I am in the morning to wake up and go work out. Now, in terms of atomic habits, so here's a good atomic habit. I would love to run a 10K or a 10-mile race in May. There's an awesome race in Philadelphia called the Broad Street Run. I ran it once before. I want to run it again. I am nowhere ready to run a 10-mile race today, but an atomic habit version of this would be, okay, I can run a mile today. Can I run a mile once a day for the next 5 days? And then next week, can I run 1.5 miles? And then can I run 2 miles and then 2.5 miles, right? So you'll see how you consistently add things on to create more sustainability and also to not burn yourself out in the process. Okay, another question. Okay, so this person said, what would be a good outline to spend an adequate amount of time for prepping for a branch while not overdoing it or underdoing it? And the response I gave to this for Kendall was, treating your branch prep like a college class, right? So if you're taking 3 credits, that means it's 3 hours. And then there's usually about 2 to 3 hours of prep work. I'm not talking about like an astrophysics class or organic chemistry class. I'm talking about maybe like a gen ed or like a 300 level business class. I was a marketing major. My marketing classes were pretty easy. So 3 hours of like classroom work would be like Vector Connect talks, observing your manager, TLA work, and then 2 to 3 hours of homework would be things like scripting, listening to podcasts, reading books, that kind of stuff. Zach Jose said, how do you live by all of your values during branch? Let's say a value of mine is fun and adventure. How would I go about that? What I said is, when you're running your branch office, and if you're doing it the right way, it will be fun for you because you're going to have this whole team around you. You're going to make new friends. You're going to have a lot of fun at team meetings, at team night out, at conferences, all of that. So when you build it, the fun will come. And an adventure, if your version of adventure is like hiking, I would say that you could go hiking with your team. Or you could plan like once a month to go hiking on like a Sunday and just plan your schedule around that. recognizing that, if your version of adventure is going hiking every single day, you're going to have to make some sacrifices here. But it is important that, you do still observe your values, but do it in a way where it's still satisfying your goals within Vector. Zach Morgan said, I'm working on developing the keystone habit of meditation. What are some atomic habits that can lead me to that? And what I said to him during this call was to start it with 1 minute and then go from 1 minute to 3 minutes and then 3 minutes to 5 minutes. And there's a really great app that you can start with called Calm, CALM, and that will really help you with creating these habits. Michaela Danchenko said, would you suggest trying to get a mentor for the spring leading to summer? And if so, what type of person should we be reaching out to? So yes, I think having a mentor is really valuable. Make sure that they're well vetted and that they're the right mentor for you. There's a difference between a mentor and a coach, by the way. A coach takes the approach of asking you questions to help you uncover the answers that lie within you. It's a very empowering approach. It can be frustrating at times when you just want to be told what to do. A mentor is someone who's going to give you the advice that they wish they had been given when they were going through this process. So if you're looking for a mentor, I would ask yourself, well, what are the goals that I'm looking to achieve? And then find a mentor who's already done that. Because like I said before, with this idea of, changing your belief system or growing into that person that you want to become, it's important to recognize that, who you're getting advice from should be an example that you would like to become like. Okay, last question here. Samuel Sanchez Bermudez. That's an awesome name. What's a great way that I can mentor my reps to help them look at us in a way that we look at mentors? Well, I would ask yourself the question, what did my DM do that really helped me see the value in mentors? That should give you the answer. In addition, I would say, taking it one step at a time, but going to conferences, getting your people to conferences and events will really help them value mentorship because they'll see it at work firsthand. So those are all the questions that I asked. I really appreciate all of you bearing with me here as we get this new recording done. I'm really hoping that this stuck. I don't want to have to record it again, but it was great going through everything with you. If you have any questions that I didn't address, please just send me a message on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll go from there. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Have a great day.